and welcome back to another video. Today we are talking about another tropical system that has formed, and that would be in the Atlantic. We have Tropical Storm Fred, which has maximum sustained winds of 40 miles an hour, minimum central pressure of 1,009 millibars, and is moving west at 17 miles an hour. So let's get right on into it. Starting off here with our warnings and cone, which shows the tropical storm that will be moving over Hispaniola throughout the day on Wednesday, moving back out into the Atlantic throughout the day on Thursday, splitting the gap between Cuba and the Bahamas, and eventually ending up in the Gulf of Mexico on the west coast of Florida, and heading its way up to make landfall in Florida. So let's take a look at the arrival time of winds with 5-day wind speed probabilities turned on, and you can see that the chances of tropical storm force winds are relatively low, as there's a lot of uncertainty, especially moving through all this land where you could have friction that will slow down the wind speeds of the storm. We'll get into that in a little bit. So let's move on here to the satellite imagery. And you can see here that Fred is a pretty small storm, with most of the thunderstorms located right around the center and very concentrated, and there's some outer bands around it. But you can see the center's not that far off from Puerto Rico, yet the thunderstorm activity is off the coast, so it's a smaller storm. Current update shows Tropical Storm Fred develops just south of Puerto Rico. Heavy rains and gusty winds spreading across Puerto Rico tonight and over Hispaniola on Wednesday. So here is the current storm information, starting off with our global and hurricane models, showing a pretty streamlined path over Hispaniola and splitting that gap. But then things start to go astray. We have many storm paths here, ranging from going through the Bahamas and making landfall just north of Miami in Florida and staying over land for the majority of its lifespan afterwards, to going all the way west in the Gulf of Mexico and maybe making landfall in areas such as Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana. So a large range there, but up until then is pretty streamlined. Now, the GEFS is showing that straight path splitting the gap and riding the coast of northern Cuba, and eventually taking a turn to the north and making landfall in Florida, which would put this out to the Gulf of Mexico longer and give it a little bit more strength. The GEPS takes that most extreme route to the east, taking this up through the Bahamas, making landfall in southern Florida north of Miami, keeping it over land and having it take a turn toward the northeast, potentially having the storm over the east coast for the rest of its lifespan. So here's the intensity guidance, and this is where things are all over the place. So we have multiple different intensities that could be happening here. Some models show this going back to a tropical depression, but the most common track here is for the storm to gradually intensify throughout the next 5 days into a mid-range tropical storm, and then of course it'll make landfall and drop off. Now, there are some outliers that show a Category 1, even up to a Category 2 hurricane, but those are unlikely compared to the rest of the tracks here. So here is Weather Nerds, and you can see that the European takes kind of a moderate track compared to the GEFS, GEPS routings. Takes this over Hispaniola, rides right in between the gaps between the Bahamas and Cuba, has the storm making landfall in the Florida Keys, coming back out into the Gulf of Mexico and making landfall in a similar area to where Hurricane Michael made landfall a couple years back. So right now, that is seeming to be what the National Hurricane Center is using for their cone here, which seems to be the mid-range route. So here is the Hwrf hurricane model, and we're just going to be taking a look at what this storm will be doing based on this model run. So you can see the storm goes over Hispaniola, weakens a little bit, probably back down to a tropical depression, and then slowly starts to re-intensify through the gap between the Bahamas and Cuba, eventually getting back to tropical storm force strength, making landfall in southern Florida right around Miami, staying over land, going back out into the Gulf of Mexico, intensifying a little bit more, and then making landfall again eventually in the panhandle of Florida. So let's take a look at the track of this storm with the overlay of the wind speeds, and you can see here that we're at low tropical storm strength before this storm makes landfall in Hispaniola. We get a little bit stronger, but of course the land of Hispaniola will weaken it. We get back into some water, and the storm strengthens potentially into a strong tropical storm or a low-end hurricane. Making landfall in Florida, weakens substantially, goes back out into the Gulf of Mexico, intensifies a little bit more into a weak tropical storm, and that's where it would make landfall yet again. So, what do you think about this storm? Comment in the comment section down below. And if you like this video, make sure consider liking, subscribing, and hitting the bell. But that's all for today. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time.